We'd like to welcome you to the WOW Empress Codes Intentional Journal readings. And I am with my STAR Queen Celebrity-preneur Protégé, Gina Gardiner. And we're just going to have a special segment for you here where we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to be in the power of the present moment. But one of the core things that we will focus on is really about becoming the journalist of your life, being able to leverage the power of intentional journaling and the benefits of this process or of this practice. So I'm excited because both Gina and I are avid journalers, and I have been for several years, and it's been really the main highlight of my entrepreneurial experience, because I've been an independent journalist, and I've published over 300 journal style trainers on Amazon. And I've been teaching this concept for many, many years. And really, my experience has been the embodiment of being the journalist of my life and really being the anchor of my life as well. And so what that looks like is being able to take my different life experiences, and I study, my life religiously in a sense, and then create journal style interactive journals from those experiences. And one of the things that I find that has been, I found that has been very beneficial throughout the years is that when you actually are studying your life and being the journalist of your life, you're able to really track your progress, but also be able to pay attention to different patterns that you may have. And also, too, these patterns aren't necessarily ones that aren't serving, but you also are able to examine the ones that are serving you as well. But it's just a healthy way of being able to continuously just examine your livelihood, but also to help you come to know yourself, even better. And so Gina has really taken hold of this concept, and it's been something that she's been embracing and embodying. And it's been very intriguing to her throughout the times of, our mentorship and our relationship. It's one of the things that she brings up fairly chronically, even in some of her own trainings, where she'll refer to me in terms of becoming the journalist, of your life, of your experience. So Gina, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful metaphor. 95% of our thoughts and our behaviors are habitual. They don't cross the conscious mind at all. And they've done a lot of research to demonstrate that we do things automatically in that habitual way, and it doesn't cross our conscious mind at all. And I've talked about that for many, many years. But when you shared with me the concept of becoming the journalist of your own life, it seemed to me such a simple way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to clients or I'm teaching, I talk about, how would, for example, a top journalist, if they were looking at, an A-list celebrity or the president of the USA or the Queen of England, what would they be looking for? And the answer will come back. You'll look at the way in which people present themselves, how they dress, how they speak, how they act, what their beliefs are that they have, people who are watching them have taken them on board. What activities do they get involved with? So that the journalists can not only report upon that, but also be there when the activity is taking place. And it's a very simple way of looking at it. When you start to examine your patterns of thinking elicit your emotions, your beliefs, your behaviors, and your language, then you can start to make decisions about whether they're being productive or not. The one thing I would say, which came along with the teaching from you, is the recognition that there's no place for being judgmental here.
Right.
And so many people, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that, I'm no use. All of those judgments actually aren't very helpful. So when a journalist is looking at the patterns of behavior, it's not their job to make a judgment about whether it's good, bad, or not. A good journalist should actually be reporting what it's there,
right,
in order for other people to make the judgment. So when you're the journalist of your own life, it's about reporting those to yourself, being aware, noticing, and then you can make a decision. If they are serving you, then do it more. If they are not serving you, have a decision to do something different and to stop doing those things that are getting in your way.
Absolutely. That was beautifully
Very
stated.
powerful. Very
And that was so powerful what you stated. And it just goes to show the intentionality even behind that, because you have to be intentional about being the journalist and taking that continuous exploration, if you will. And something that's coming up now in terms of even a core theme for those who are listening would be, no, don't just become the journalist, of your life and have your own examination, continuously. How do you take being the journalist of your life and now help someone else? Because journalists don't just do the research for themselves.
Yeah.
They gather, and then they they take the information and make it public friendly. So there are areas of your life that you have studied, in a sense, and that could be the areas of your expertise. Some of your hobbies, different things like that. If you examine those, look at ways of how you actually can support others, and then broadcast that, make it public friendly, and then be the anchor of the experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can do that. And so I want to share off the top that Kindle Direct Publishing is a platform of Amazon, and you are able to set up a free account and be able to publish for free. You don't actually need a budget in order to leverage this platform. If you are going to have maybe an editor or someone to proofread and to create you a book cover or so, then those are options that you can do aside from that platform, and it's still incorporated with that platform, but it's actually not required, because on this platform, they supply free ISBNs, templates for you to use, for your book covers. And then if you just do your documents yourself, which I'll talk a little bit about that as we progress within this particular segment, how you can format your documents and sort of the best ways, to do that, a few proofreading techniques or so. And you can really start publishing these interactive style journals just by utilizing your everyday life and just looking at, hey, what are 3 to 5 areas that I actually can support others with? And so Gina and I also are going to talk a little bit about the simplicity of actually being able to publish these intentional style interactive journals. And so it's a really easy process. But before we actually go start getting into that, Gina, is there anything that you would like to say, just in reference to the importance of taking your experiences and then being the anchor or the broadcaster of that to share with others?
I'd like to make the distinction, to talk about how I've used being the journalist in my own life in order to support the creation of intentional workbooks and journals. And they come in very different ways. So if I could just use 3 examples. So for example, I've got series of workbooks for empaths, for example.
Yes.
So I'll start off with what I've noticed in other people. So harnessing the power of being an empath, for example. Within that, I've identified the patterns of behavior that I have noticed when I've worked with empaths over the years that have got in the way of them stepping into their true power. And so it's been how I have noticed, not that things just been a one-off, but there have been consistent patterns of thinking, beliefs, and behaviors that have got in the way. And so I've got a series of books which has then utilized that information to support a structure to help empaths move past their baggage and the things that are holding them back. But then in a very different way, for example, this is a journal which talks about how I find the window on my own soul. That's very much looking at how I've been a journalist in my own life.
That's right.
And looking at the patterns of, again, thoughts, beliefs, behaviors that support my own growth. And so sharing that with other people, it's very different to looking at the patterns in other people. This is absolutely about the patterns that have worked for me.
Right.
And then there have been the opportunity for example, looking at writing and my experience of writing. And before I started on the intentional journals, I had a very different style of writing, which is much more conventional in terms of big books with lots of chapters. And so I shared my author journey and then introduced the concept of intentional journals because I could see the value of those. Each of the books and the style of books has a value, but the intentional journals was something that felt were particularly pertinent at this time and really helpful for people in business and for people who had a message or expertise or experience to share. So you can share your experience personally, or you can you share your experience of other people or your
case studies.
The range is endless. So I just thought that might be helpful.
Oh no, that was perfect. I love how you did that because that was so on point. And it goes back to what I was mentioning about you can take 3 to 5 areas or so of your life, because a lot of times people think that they have to have a specific area to write on, and then they get known for that specific thing, and then they have to continuously write for that. And though it's okay to have different areas of expertise that you can write on or core focuses, but being able to leverage the whole of yourself, different areas of your life can serve more people. So when people talk about wanting to serve the masses, they have to reposition how they think about serving the masses. And so what you provided was a stellar example of you providing these different areas from your own life experience, but also your case studies, and that's part of the research of what you've observed with others, and then being able to create something that can benefit them so that you're able to serve different industries. And going back to early on with my independent journalism experience, which was in cross industries, cross niche journalism. And it really is a paradigm that I created of being able to take your life and leverage it and be the journalist of your life and then serve different industries, with that. And later on, it went to be a huge part of my marketing advantage. I even had a online radio training platform at one time that was leveraged for the cross niche marketing journalist training hub, and it was on Blog Talk Radio. And so being able to leverage these different aspects of your journey and having them in the written format are perfect. So before I want to expound a little bit more based on what you just presented, I feel guided to actually talk about the power of being able to produce the mini book formats, the mini messenger formats, and leveraging them in this intentional journaling way, in a sense, is because one of the things that we know is that we've lived in an era of information overload. And people are constantly inundated with a lot of information from the internet, and even different books that they read that have a lot of content in them. And it's not that we aren't designed to ingest a certain amount of content, but the better ways for people to really receive and let it be more palatable, if you will, is to be able to give a core focus and let them actually focus on that and do some mastery around that and develop themselves in these different experiences. So when we talk about having these mini messenger publications, we're talking about 30 to 70 pages, and some may go on to 100 or so, but primarily you want the smaller formats with less content, but just enough to evoke and produce some triggers. So within these publications, you can have, yes, a base of a premise that you want to share, but also be able to introduce some journal prompts, some Q&A, assessments, just different things that individuals can actually do the work themselves without you having to really do a lot of inundation in terms of the content. Surely, if they need something more, then they need to be sitting maybe in a course with you, or something that you're facilitating live. But just within a publication format, it'd be better to actually produce them in a series. But going back to with what Gina demonstrated is she used 3 different journals as examples of different areas of her life. So let's revisit those again. So we had the harnessing the power of being an empath. So put that one back up, please. Okay, so tell the subtitle of that one.
The subtitle is a self-exploration and empathic empowerment guide for tapping into your limitless potential.
Yes, so it's a self-exploration. So she's giving a general premise. She's telling her experience, for sure. But then she has a process within there that helps them to explore what she's talked about, but also enough room for them to explore even outside of what she's talked about, because it's been, their journey. She's just providing the sacred space and the trigger mechanics, if you will, in order for that to stimulate and evoke the inner wisdom and the reflection for that individual. So that's a niche that she is serving. She's an empath and she's worked with empaths, and now she's providing something from the journalist experience of her life and has provided that for that particular core focus, or that niche group or audience of interest, so to speak. So then let's hold back up the garden, my garden of my soul, or my garden.
So the subtitle of that is a journal of reflection to explore the relationship with your inner wisdom.
Yes. And so that's another exploration. So they're common themes, okay? She's got different publications, but they have core focuses of individuals being able to be their own explorers of their experience. And so within that, tell a little bit about, because you're a gardener as well. So you do a lot of gardening, and you have expressed how you found that is kind of a sacred place for you when you're doing that. So talk a little bit about that.
I've found it quite hard to meditate in the conventional sense of the meditation, sitting there and being very still. But what I do find is where I feel closest to nature, closest to God, is when I'm in my garden. And if I'm got my hands in the soil, or I'm pruning, I'm able to go into that meditative state because the busyness of my mind is stilled and I feel at one with myself and with source. And there are, for everybody, there will be things that help them get into that place where they've got that real connection with their inner wisdom, their intuition, and with source. For some people, it may be running, or it could be art or music. But the whole premise of the book is recognize that it's time when you take time to get off the busy world and stop the white noise, then you can make that inner connection, which is so powerful. But find the way that works for you. And whatever other people tell you, it may work for them, but not for you. And it's about exploring, giving yourself permission, A, to take the time, and secondly, to explore what works for you.
Absolutely. And that's important, because it is about getting into your own information. You know me, I'm very big on that,
Yeah.
is being able, again, provide enough content to stimulate and evoke and be the trigger to bring out from others that which is within. And so that they're not having to make so many decisions based on kind of these success templates that are out there saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And we're no longer in that time of the cookie cutter format. This is the era of individuality, unique individuality, and how people discover and step into that unique individuality is knowing themselves. And this process helps you to know yourself. And again, here are things that you're doing in your everyday life, and just now taking parts of your exploration again and your experience, and then being able to provide that for others. And so that's what we're really modeling here, today. And we have several journals that will be featured. And mainly the reason why we're doing this is just to be able to give you something that you can see in a demonstration format and let you see how simple this is to be able to kind of transcribe your life, in a sense, if you will. And again, this isn't about producing big novels and big books. I often tell people, when you get started, you can have just an introduction, and it can be one page, and then the rest of that publication can be affirmations, empowering questions, journal prompts, is what I use the most, but it can be very simple. So it doesn't need to be something, that's hard. And the thing about it, people will actually appreciate that too, when you can put the power into their hands to be able to come up with what is best for them. And so that's something that these publications, they really invite others, to do this. And so just going back to the two that have been shown and demonstrated so far, again, Gina's taking from her experience. She's an empath, and how she's worked with empaths, and then has created the publication, how gardening and her story around that, and now putting those principles and practices into a publication, because someone else identifies exactly with what she's expressing. And so that can help someone. So the next one is the Embracing the Author Within. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the subtitle is A New Approach to Life and Publishing for Leaders.
Yes, yes. And so with that one, and these, I'll kind of back up a little bit, even though we kind of talked about how I helped you to get on this journey, with creating these, when you were, previously doing sort of the traditional format, right? And I just want to say this, within the last less than a year, really, Gina has produced over 30 publications now. You had 6 or 7 prior to this.
About 23 publications since last.
Right.
I started a year last June.
Right. So then it put you into the 30 bracket, right? Because you had the 6 or the 7. Right. And so again, being able to put these out, she puts them out quickly, and being able to turn them over. And the good thing too, I want to interject this, is the good thing about publishing with Kindle Direct Publishing is that you can have your works up on Amazon within 24 to 72 hours. And so it doesn't take long, for you to actually, you submit your work, and then it goes through review, and then it's up, ready to serve the world. And so Embracing the Author Within is that she was on her journey of discovering a new way to write and publish. And so from there, discovering this new way to write and publish, what does she do? She produces the publication and helps others to embrace the author that's within them. Because one of the things that we know is that a lot of people actually get intimidated even when it comes to writing and publishing a book. Now, why is that? A lot of times it's because they believe that it's hard to do. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And within the structures that we provide, takes the intimidation, Gina would agree, takes the intimidation, yes, out of the process. And so when you're publishing less words your way, so to speak, and not producing a curriculum or a big book, it's a faster, easier process. And again, if you're able to be kind of modest in the content, but very meaningful in the message to make the impact that you're trying to make. And so we're just showing how you can just today look at these areas of your life and pick out those 3 to 5 areas, and then just make you a tentative outline of what you would like to share, what you feel would be most beneficial. Sometimes it's even best to create the publication that you feel you need for yourself. And also I want to bring up is that you don't have to be an expert or an authority in order in certain areas to be able to produce content. Because if you're producing it even from the place of just your own experience, you are 1 or 2 steps ahead of the person who does not know what you know. And so sometimes you have to look at yourself in that way as well. But another thing I want to bring up, when you think about a journalist, okay, a journalist is not necessarily an expert in the areas that they're going to study, so to speak, or they're going to report on. They're an expert in their craft and ability to be able to capture certain experiences, and then again, come back and make it public friendly for an audience, more palatable. And so obviously they do a lot of editing because they can't bring back everything that they have gathered and researched, because the newspaper is not going to call, it doesn't call for all of that. They just need, what are the main things, the main components that the public needs to know? And the same with being an anchor. So within this experience, you don't need to focus on, I got to have all this and so much. No, you just need, what do people most need to know about this particular aspect, but then allow them to have that exploration, to have, the journey. So Gina, I'm going to come back to you.
Can I give 2 different examples?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I've over 30 years experience of developing transformational leadership.
Right.
And so a lot of my books and my journals are around leadership. So here's a series.
Yes.
All of those are looking at leaders of different aspects of leadership. Yes. And I would say that that's an area of very significant expertise for me. Mm-hmm. And it offers people the opportunity to look at themselves and to develop themselves as leaders. But very differently, one of the more recent books is Your Life in Their Hands. And that arose out of an experience, actually not mine initially, of a friend who is at the moment fighting cancer, which has come back for the 3rd time. And the recognition that you have to take responsibility for your own health rather than just leave it in the hands of the doctors.
Right.
And so in this book, it's both the experience for both of us in terms of how we have learned the hard way that you have to take responsibility for your own health, and giving people the opportunity to consider how they are looking after their own health and well-being, but also to learn directly from our experiences, not as an expert in the medical field, and it's not a doctor at all, but it is about being an expert on our own experiences.
That's it.
And how other people can learn from that. So within the back, it's not a journal in the accepted sense, but it's saying, if you're going to go and see your medical practitioner, then prepare for it.
Absolutely.
So what are the questions are you going to ask? How are you going to keep track of the information? And then how are you going to work towards looking after yourself in a much more holistic way? So very different. And just for those of you that say I can't write, Vicky, who co-authored this with me, she actually spoke into a transcript piece of software called Otter AI. And she just spoke, and then I tidied it up. But they're her words spoken into a transcript. And you can't just use it as it is, but it can really short circuit things, particularly I've spoken to a couple of people, for example, who are dyslexic. and say, I can't become an author because I'm dyslexic. Well, actually, that's not true. If you believe you can't become an author because you're dyslexic, then you can't. But if you believe that there are other ways, then you can take those ways and you could use other pieces.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to highlight those
Absolutely. That was perfect. That was signature there. And also too, you know, on the note of kind of the audio, is that there's the opportunity also for people who don't feel that they are writers to do audio books as well. And so, you know, that's the thing, is there's no limitation, is that you can still do many audio books, you know, so to speak, and leverage that. So you just want to be able to broadcast, if you will, in the ways that are going to be best for you, because you're still being the journalist or the anchor, you know, of your life and your experience. It's just getting the message out, because there are some journalists who actually don't write for newspapers or do blogging. They just do the anchor, you know, part of it. So there's different functionalities, you know, within the traditional journalism experience, but also different functionalities within just your life journalism, you know, experience. But one of the things that I want to highlight or sort of emphasize more at this point is that, but when you actually can put it into the publication format, where people can engage it, it's a more powerful experience, because they're able to, you know, write and move the energy in that way. And so though hearing is great, and we learn that, you know, faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word, and that's great. But also the word, so to speak, was written. It was spoken and written. But when you can engage in the writing aspect of it, you know, it's just phenomenal. So Gina, before I actually start talking about, you know, maybe a few simple ways that people can get started with the writing, you know, process, and having just, you know, easier strategies. And so I would love for you to sort of piggyback on that, just in terms of the speaking aspect too, because you actually have audiobooks, right?
I do. I have a number of audiobooks. And what I think, my latest book, which is just, I'm just, as we were talking, I was just proofreading the final version of it, which will be published by the end of this week, which is taking the bullshit out of
and we'll put the audio to that talk, because it came repurposed from a talk. We'll put the audio from the talk into the description.
So that started as a talk, and then I've used this talk as the basis, and then given people prompts to help them utilize what the talk is talking about. How do you then use that to help you create your own very effective BS meter at a personal level, and so on. And it's actually going to be the beginning of a range of VIP intensive and so on. So the trigger point can be your book, it can be your audio, it can be a video. And I think that when you bring them all together, that's when you have, well, if I go back to my time when I was a head teacher or a principal, we talked about styles of learning, and people will be visual, they'll be auditory, or they will be kinesthetic, which means they're doers. And the ideal thing is to bring them together. And one of the reasons why journals work so well is you're bringing the seeing, because you're reading, and the doing, because you're journaling. But I think for those people who are auditory, having an audio to go along with it means that you are capturing every style of learning.
Absolutely.
And that's the most powerful.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for saying that, because I was like, yeah, she has audiobooks. I would certainly love to hear her take on this. Now, something else you brought up in terms of the current publication and how that's being, you know, repurposed from a talk, and that's something obviously, you know, I'm big on, and I've been teaching that for quite some time. Is a lot of my early on publications, because actually when I first got started in publishing, I published a traditional publication, and then when I went on to start doing the mini books and the journals, and really teaching in that format, a lot of my publications came from me transforming blogs into into books.
Yeah.
And into audios, you know, as well, and vice versa, and repurposing different audios from teleclasses and different trainings that I had facilitated, and being able to then, put those into the journal style formats or workbooks or just however. The goal is, it's really about the interaction. So even if people aren't creating journals, so to speak, again, it's not so much about that. It is that any publication or audio rendering, so to speak, that you can produce from being the journalist of your life. And you really do need to be intentional about that, because even though people share their experiences, but when you can actually become conscious in a way to multiply your efforts and to multiply your experience, that is what makes for the the more richer experience, I should say. And that really is what reaches and transforms the masses. So before starting to talk about really some simple ways to do this, I want to go back to talking about the benefits of this practice. And so, Gina, I would love for you to actually, share about what you have found to be extremely beneficial for you by being able to get present with different journals, because you actually have journals of mine as well, and we've co-authored a lot of works together. But you have works of mine that are outside of yours, of course, that you have to get present with as well. And so being able to have the experience that you can engage these different topics in a more categorized way. So talk a little bit about the power, of that process.
Right. I think I'd like to talk about this at two levels, really. And
yes.
Perhaps it's going back. There are many benefits of actually writing the books themselves. One is that it enables you to, if you imagine you're an explorer and you're going up to Everest, to the top of Everest, you can't carry all of your supplies with you. You leave deposits of your supplies for you to find going back. And in a sense, that's what you're doing. You're leaving deposits for other people to find of where you have been, because you've moved on and gone up the mountain. And in your experience, as you write the book, the very process of writing the book really solidifies that experience and gives a resource for far more people than if you were able to speak to them one-on-one. So it multiplies hugely the number of people who you have the capacity to support and help. But there's also the actual writing of the journal, in my experience, that I have found that has moved my evolution on.
Absolutely.
They used to, when I was a principal, head teacher, one of the principles was that you would teach something to either a member of staff or to the children, and then you would get them to teach that to somebody else. And in the teaching to somebody else, then not only did it really embed those principles, that expertise, that experience, but also the confidence of doing that, and the fact that you had to think about things in a very different way, expanded the experience and the evolution. And that's been a very powerful thing for me. The other thing about it is that there is something energetically about creating something and thinking about it in the format where what is it that I'm going to offer someone else? How can I frame the wording so it will be accessible for other people? And in creating that level of accessibility, that simplicity, if you like, it not only clarifies it for the reader, but it clarifies it for yourself. And the whole thing moves you on. So that experience of writing the journals, I think, has been hugely, hugely powerful. Engaging in journals, and I've sometimes used my own, but more often than not, I've used other people's, has been that trigger that perhaps would not otherwise have happened. It's like opening a door. Excuse me a moment, there's something's gone on. Can I just hold on a moment?
Yeah, so while she's checking in on that, I want to continue, you know, on the note of really the benefits and sort of kind of expand the awareness around this. So she's talking about being able to use other people's journals and how it's produced those different triggers. And so when you think about that, is that you can have your own, of course, that you use and you work through. But when you produce your own for other people, they're going to be having that same experience that she's talking about, that if it had not been for what you created, it may not have stimulated that thought process for someone else. And so that's another reason why, for me, of being someone who's been, like I said, an avid, you know, journaler, and definitely constantly examining my life, is that I know that the questions I have for myself, that when I actually start to go put these in down for someone else, then more awareness comes in terms of then what they would need, even in addition to that. And again, knowing that when that goes out in the public, that's going to bless someone tremendously, because they're going to have something outside of themselves for, you know, in a sense, but enough to trigger and stimulate that information that's within, and help them to answer the questions in their lives that maybe they've been pondering about. So, Gina, I see you're back then. Go ahead and turn it back over.
My apologies.
No, go ahead.
My cat had stood on the television, the television zapper, and turned the television on.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly I had the television in the next room noise going on. So
that's what was happening. Okay.
Yeah, my apologies for that.
No, fine.
I was going on to say, in terms of journaling myself, every time that I've journaled where the trigger has come, it opens another door.
Yes.
It's easy to consistently recreate the same cycle of thinking that you have. And that's what most of us do. That's where the habitual bit comes from. So journaling does three things for me. The first is that the prompt to the journal opens up another way of thinking. Sometimes it's a way of thinking where the prompt, I agree with it, and it's then taken my thinking further. Sometimes it's in the very nature of thinking, that doesn't sit with my values. That's not right. Why doesn't it sit with my values? What's really going on here? Why is this triggering me in such a way? And that's just as valuable. So that,
right.
So whether it's a positive construct or what could be perceived as not negative, but not my thinking, also makes me think more.
Exactly. Yes.
Second thing it does, and I also journal where there is no prompt, and I just allow my thoughts to go where they will, and that can be really helpful. And the times that I tend to do that is when either I'm not quite sure, and there's perhaps a decision to be made, or I've reached a bit of a crossroads and I'm not quite sure which way to go. I find that's very helpful because the process of writing is particularly helpful in the winter. In the summer, I'm probably more likely to go out in the garden. But in the winter, when it's pouring with rain and I don't really want to go out in the garden, then picking up a pen and just going into a journaling mode will do the same thing for me. And I will get clarity out of that in terms of where I want to go and what my next move is.
Yes, absolutely.
The third thing I get out of journaling is it takes me out of left brain thinking, very logical. It tends to be either or. So it's not about choice. It's about, it's very much black and white. And it gets me into creative solution mode. Left brain thinking is very much about what's the problem. Right brain is very much, let's look for the solution. It's much more focused on lots of possibilities. And so it's a very effective way of getting from when that you're in that place where you can't find the way through, or you think you can't find the way through.
It's more of flow versus figuring, you know, and that is the thing we really want to be intentional about. Is there are the different variations, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as you can see, with a number of the publications that I produce, you see a variety of different styles.
Absolutely.
So there are some where there are questions, and then there are some where it's a setup, and then they're just the pages that you are able to have that your own exploration in that way. Because there are times where you actually don't need the trigger, so to speak, because life itself will provide those triggers. And so having a variety of these styles of publications and to use for yourself, but also when you're producing them. And so what I want to bring up right now, and then we can, you know, have some other dialogue and then wrap up here. But when others are producing these types of journal style trainers or mini messengers, so to speak, is that, you know, I talked about thinking about 3 to 5 areas of focus, you know, from your life, whether hobbies, skill, or something that, you know, you are interested in and are wanting to explore. And so creating explore journals in many different formats are great. So Gina has provided examples of ones that she has created for others to explore. But also, again, if there's something that you have an interest in that maybe you haven't stepped into that space yet, then you create a planner for that. Create yourself an exploration planner. If you want to travel somewhere, then create a journal. Create that to be your journal, your planner, your travel planner, and then be able to share that with the world as well. So again, these are just very simple ways that you can be able to share from your life experience. Again, it doesn't have to be where you're an expert, the area you're an expert in. It doesn't have to be an area where you even have mastery in, even as a hobby. Again, it can just be something you are interested in right now. And you're like, hey, I'm going to go on an adventure to learn more about this. And as you're going on that adventure, just start making, hey, this is my recorder. This is my journal recorder and my planner. And so again, just being able to share different aspects and elements, you would be surprised how much you can help someone. So there are the journals or the publications where, yes, you provide a substantial amount. And when it's a substantial amount, I'm still talking in the mini book format, so Gina, actually in a minute, I'll come back to that, because you have publications where I would say they have a substantial amount of material in it, even for a mini book, which is perfect, but then it has the exploration process. And so, again, it's a variety. There's different variations where you can provide some that are still like a book and then have the journal experience, but then you can provide some that are compositions or just the journals with triggers and Q&A. And so the reason why I'm just sharing all of this is because you just don't want to overcomplicate the process. I say start simple, but do know, expand and have some variety. No one book that Gina has held up at this point has the same structure in a sense. I mean, there's some similarities, but because of the topic and the nature, it provides some diversity. Would that be correct, Gina?
Absolutely. I can give some other examples.
Absolutely, please do.
So during the lockdown, I created this journal. It's called It's Time to Become a Beacon of Light and Hope, because it's my belief that one of the things that's really important for leaders to do is to provide a sense of hope and possibility, not the Pollyanna sort of hope that, you know,
right.
Head in the sand, it'll all be all right, but actually a recognition that collectively, if we work together, we can find a way through. And so there is an introduction which talks about the difference between blind hope. In fact, you created the forward for this article, and talking about, you know, how you can become an illuminated, enlightened leader and light the way for other people in challenging times. Now, the journal part of this, each day within the journal, I've found a quote from a great leader sometimes those quotes are quite famous. Churchill, for example, is one of them. People that I actually didn't know, but I went searching for quotes that I thought would really give you a platform to be thinking about hope and how you could engender hope. And so each day is just a quote, and then there's a question. If you look at creating the profits from the inside out, that's different in the sense that rather than having a big introduction at the beginning and then questions or prompts, it's in sections, and each section then leaves its space for people. So I've just opened the book, and number 6 is Ditching the Beliefs Which Limit You. And so then it gives you the text to that section, the questions to that section, and then leaves you to do the journaling. So very, very different to others where there may be a prompt or a question at the top, but the information's at the beginning, and then it's separated out. So lots of different styles.
Oh, absolutely. And then, like you said, then there are ones that have just a brief, like I said, introduction or so, and then there are just the blank pages, or the pages with a header or affirmation, or and so again, there's a variety, a variety of ways. So I have this concept, and Gina, you know all about this, that I call, the royal flush, and I use it and leverage it in multiple ways. And so being able to sometimes pick 5 key concepts or things that you want to bring out in your writing, and then just produce a modest amount of content around that. But you can simplify it even more by just choosing 3 things, 3 steps to doing this, or 3 keys, or 3 things you discovered, 3 things you need to know about X, Y, and Z. So you can write a paragraph or 2 paragraphs about each particular thing. And again, then just allow whether an interactive page of questioning, and also too, when it comes to questions, you can have the questions where they're just constantly rinsing and repeating throughout the journal. So it's not that you have to come up with so many different sets of questions. So if you come up with, let's say, 5 to 6 questions, then let those just be repetitive throughout the journal, because oftentimes the questions that you ask yourself, you're going to have to continuously ask yourself those questions several times. It's not just a one and done thing where I ask myself this question and I'm just done with that. No, you come up with questions that, what are you constantly asking yourself over and over, or things that you're thinking about, or I'm curious about this. So again, there's just a lot of different ways. And the reason why we are kind of sharing this variety is because I'm a disruptor, and Gina's a disruptor as well. And so sometimes your brain needs to be expanded. And as Gina would say, explode. So we go from expansion to explosion. Because when you can actually have your mind kind of blown in a sense, and it may seem overwhelming in the moment, but then you can reflect back on the simplicity of what's being offered. And there's different sections and segments of that, that you take. But the goal for today is that we just wanted to come and really, have a conversation. This was not actually a planned segment that we were going to do per se. We just felt guided to be able to share about this topic in whatever way, that it would, whatever way it would flow. And so, Gina, I'm glad that we've got to have this conversation. Something that I do want to bring up, because I've been mentioning it and I realize I haven't gotten to it yet. I talked a little bit about the simplistic way to be able to create, your publication. But I also want to share with you the best ways to actually set up your interior. And so you leave here complete. The platform, KDP, to go and sign up for your free account. And but also too, if you don't have Word or Word Perfect or whatever document that you use, I recommend that individuals download Apache Open Office, and it's free to download. And so you can use that. It formats very well, especially as it relates to KDP. And so you're going to choose the style of 5x8, well, that's the size, the 5x8 or 6x9. So you write that down.
So
and
there's
then,
a 5x8.
There you go. Perfect. And that's one from me.
And there's a 6x9.
And there's a 6x9. Perfect. And
or you can have a bigger one. That's another
a
one.
bigger one. Yeah, that's an 8x5x11. And it's still considered interactive.
And then there's an even bigger one. So you can have the biggest version.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of different sizes you can do.
Absolutely. 8x5x11. And then I think the one prior was an 8x10. And so, yeah, so there's a variety that you can use. Now, to start off, I recommend actually starting off publishing a 5x8 mini book or a 6x9 journal. And you're going to set your margins. The left and right will be set at 0.375, which will convert to 38. And then your top and your bottom will be set at 0.25. And so that's your margins. You've got that. You've got your size that you're going to use, to start out. And then it's just a matter of being able to now, put your content, within there. And the best way for me that I have found to actually format this is to actually go ahead and create your document in the size that you desire to, for it to be published in, and then start typing within that document versus type it all out and then try to put it in the document and size it, because it's like you're formatting as you're going along. And I have found over the years that it's a simpler process. And actually, when I've done that, I've done a better job than those I've actually paid to do my formatting. So it's just interesting. But again, you don't need a budget to do that. You can do that yourself. Also, for proofreading, a good exercise to do is that if you do type out your document and you print it out, to read it backwards the first time. Read it backwards the first time, and then come and read it normally. And it's something about when you read it in reverse, you catch what you don't catch initially just reading it, the same way. And it's interesting. I don't know, Gina, if you've heard the concept about when those who are right-handed write with their left hand, and it triggers something different in the brain, even though it's, not coming out as neat, of course, as it would in the hand that they're trained in. But it's something about when you write with the opposite, it's stimulating a different level of energy within your neurons and neural pathways and everything. It's changing the environment for something else to take place. And so reading your manuscript backwards, and I guess, this can work too, even if you don't print it out and you're just reading it, even on the screen, that can work as well. But so those are just some things. We're just throwing out, quite a few things for you to be able to take into consideration. Something else that's coming up that I want to bring up is that your books really are always written. They're already written. And if you go and look at social media posts that you've put up and questions that you've asked or things that you were trying to empower people with, that's content. And so when you look across, whether it's a blog you've done, again, social media posts, different things, look at that as content. And how can you repurpose that? You're already the journalist of your life in many ways. What we're doing is we're just making you more conscious of it and to be intentional about this process so that you can not only help yourself in a sense, but you can help others at the same time, make an impact and an income. Definitely. So Gina, before we get ready to wrap this up, because we've talked about quite a bit here, and I know that you and I are going to be doing even a more extended, series around this, for others to get the benefits of really starting this process and this journey of of being the journalist, of their lives and gaining that benefit of impacting themselves with that practice, but also being able to turn around and provide that for someone else. So let's feature, a few journals. Like you have several of mine that you've been working through as well. And so whichever ones you feel guided to, to share, and even if you want to make some distinctions about the difference between, some of the processes within there, feel free, to do that as well.
So there have been journals that I've used, and they have been very much about using them for my own development. So particularly my spiritual development, I would say that A Fresh New Start with God. I just want to make the distinction that this is not about religion.
Right.
For me, it's very much about my spiritual journey. And there's been it's a very short introduction, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions within the book. And one of the processes that AliNICOLE taught me was to, rather than to think about them all, what is it that catches your eye in that particular moment? And so when I've journaled, it actually has tended to go to 2 of the 7 questions far more than the others, which is an interesting thing to notice. And that's been very powerful in terms of helping me understand what I mean by spirituality. What do I mean by the new era of consciousness? What do I believe that is? And that's been really, really helpful.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So another one which I think I've used a lot is called the Red Root Riches for Empathic Entrepreneurs. And that's looking particularly at how is, well, this is what I've been looking at, is to recognize how particularly the root chakra has such an importance in terms of one's security and abundance, and how that needs to be in good order in order for you to be able to attract abundance into your life. And that it's quite interesting because I've looked at this book many times, but it keeps coming back to the same paragraph, and I'm going to read it to you. Interestingly, to start with, it was about 1 paragraph, and then it suddenly became expanded to the next one. So I'll read you the 2. Okay, the new fundamentals are all about entering into new dimensions of your chakras in order to gain clarity for the greater realizations that leads to more expanded revelations about the new foundations, new formation, and the new functionality for the root chakra. As a result, you'll experience the higher benefits of transformations and manifestations of a new awakened life, business, and financial success. And it's interesting that has kept coming back. Whenever I've looked at the book, that's where I've been taken. So that's obviously the area that for me is really pertinent at the moment. But then we've also used these books in a different way, and helping me help other people, and reading the introduction with a view to not specifically what it has in mind for me, although there is a big element of that, but fundamentally the intentionality behind it has been about me being able to support other people. And so that's been really interesting. And
so which one do you have there?
So for me, that's the Inner Healing Pool.
Okay, yes.
You can't really see the title very well from it. It says the Inner Healing Pool. Okay. And it's, for me, it's about that we have the power to heal ourselves. And I think it might be just useful to read a little extract.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's one of my throwbacks too, so I'd be interested to revisit that myself and hear what I wrote.
So it's about the global healing aspect, that through healing myself and helping to somebody else to heal themselves, because I can't heal them, but I can support them in their healing journey. That bringing forth what will come out of that, that will come the opportunity to work together, and in doing so, that the power of doing that work will create a global ripple. But in order to do that is the realization that the other person has to do the activation of their own healing pool. I can heal myself, and I can support other people. But for me, and what I've written in the journal, it's about holding that space. It's a sacred space, and having the intention to hold that space.
Beautiful. Yes, that's great. Yeah.
So, and I don't know how many more you want me to look at.
Oh, it's just however you feel guided.
Is the Millionaire Monarch Metamorphosis Factor. And that's Transformational Leaders' Intentional Journal Prompts Planner for evolving and launching from your millionaire cocoon. And for me, this was very much about when you talk to people about abundance, particularly financial abundance, very often they talk about it in the future rather than the now. I'm going to be rich. It's going to be better. And one of the things that came out of this for me is that you have to live the millionaire life. I don't mean by going out and getting into debt, but living the experience of having a millionaire mindset, having a millionaire belief and experience before those things manifest themselves. And it ties in very nicely with Esther Hicks and her view of the vibrational vortex, and that whatever transpires has to be in your vortex. So has been another one that's been very instrumental.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you to share a prompt or so, from whether it's one that, you feel guided or just what you turn to. I felt the energy, of that. And so I feel like a prompt would be good for those who are viewing. Anything they need to ask themselves.
I think one of the most powerful prompts is, who am I as a millionaire? How am I going to show up? Because we often, I suppose it resonates because I've always taught, be the promotion that you want, be the success that you want. And Gandhi said, be the change you want in others, that you have to be it. And I think that's one of the distinctions I would make with people, that, and I'm more than other, the big learning for me is moving from a human doing
to
human being.
Yes.
I think we're wrongly named as a race. I think we should have been called human doings.
that evolved in the human beings, right?
When we become the being bit of ourselves, the true evolution happens. And so part of that has working with this book has been about exploring, as a millionaire. So if I just at random, another prompt is reverse engineer your evolution and be present with the vibration on completion for this phase. And then it says the transformed best version of me at this phase looks like. And so one of the principles that is so important in our work is that the best version of you today is the foundation of the best version of you tomorrow, and so on. And so what does that transformed best version look like now, and then where next? How are you going to move that on? So very, very powerful.
Oh, and thank you so much for sharing those. I thought it was just important to bring forth different examples. And like I mentioned, that this is really a special segment, within this series, so to speak, is because when Gina and I got together, we knew that we wanted to do something around having the journals. But I said, let's just be in this space and we can talk about a few things that will come up that maybe we plan to discuss at one point. But we just wanted to be prepared just to share organically with no real agenda, no training, format to really teach you from. Just would be whatever would come up. Let the triggers of the moment be what we would share and provide for you. But we were prepared to be in position for those triggers. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because your life is the same. Position and prepare and position yourself to be ready for the triggers. So what this looks like at this moment is that you may not have intentional journals by someone at this point, but definitely get yourself a few compositions or some post-it notes or so. And it can be different sizes of compositions or notebooks. Have at least 3 of those. They're inexpensive. Have at least 3 of those that you can put. One is for, my idea, my ahas, and start writing your ahas down, within that particular one. Another one can be for, your spirituality or so, or things you're curious about. So start being intentional in those ways. And then just have the one where you are just having kind of a, whether you want to call it a brain dump, or it's just, where you're just writing your thoughts, in there. And being able to start being intentional about that and having yourself prepared so that when it is time for you to then consider writing and producing publications, then you can get another composition or notebook or journal, and then start writing within that. Let that be the sacred space for those specific things of you starting to develop. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of times what delays people is sometimes not having certain things in order. And so you may not know what you're going to encounter when you go out or so, but if you have your pen and paper, a little notepad or something, not necessarily when you go out in the world, because I know some of you men won't be carrying purses where you could just dig in and get a notepad or so out of it, but you may have to just obviously record that in your mind or in your phone, and so just being prepared for the prompts and the triggers of life that you can record and capture quickly, and then come back at another point and do your reflection around it or your formulation, around it, because it's something about the magic of being able to have the openness to get in and do what needs to be done when there's a window. So again, we have the journals that were gathered today. But when we came to this experience, it was going to be, okay, whatever comes up is what's going to come up to provide the rich experience. Life wants to do that for you as well. It's ready to pour in wisdom and information, sometimes on a variety of things. How prepared will you be? How intentional will you be about being able to capture those moments, those ahas, those profitable ahas? Because this is only going to prepare you to be able to also be the prompt and trigger in life to other people. So when you go out, you'll be able to speak something that's going to trigger and provide those prompts for other people. So it's really a win-win scenario. So we could talk about this for days, but going to bring this to a conclusion. But before we do so, and also the publications that were featured today, we'll make sure that those are in the description, for you as well. And also too, just some other opportunities and resources that will actually help you with the publishing process. And of course, Gina featured her work, for that. And I have some work, as well in that area. But Gina, before we wrap up, because I'm actually going to let you, you close this out. Thank you so much, of course, for sharing this space, with me and us being able to do this and talk about this important topic. So I'm going to actually turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. For those of you that are listening, just recognize the value that you carry within yourself. And I talk very much about leaving a living legacy, you know, rather than wait till you die and you know people at your funeral saying what a wonderful person you are. Why not share that experience, expertise, your knowledge, the essence of you? You know, hindsight is the only exact science. How often have you wished that you had a piece of information, or that you had somebody who'd traveled that road before, who would stop you getting caught in a quicksand or going down a cul-de-sac or having to climb the mountain? If only you'd known that there was an easier, simpler, safer, quicker way. And you can do that for others. And it doesn't have to be waiting till you've got this huge production, because the likelihood is you'll never do it. Break it down into bite-sized chunks and make it easy for yourself, but recognize that every one of you has experience, expertise, knowledge, and skills that would be of value to not everybody, but to a group of people who are going through life and who are experiencing things that you've already experienced and would benefit from you being able to share. And you then get the benefit that comes from sharing with that. So thanks for joining us, and please take action. You know, lots of people listen, do nothing with it. Awareness and in and of itself is not about as much use as a chocolate teapot. So it is about taking action. We shared with you why it's so important. Now it's time to get on and do, and it doesn't have to be hard. And if you're finding it really difficult, you know, reach out, because there are opportunities to have someone help you. But thanks very much indeed. And I look forward to seeing your book on the shelf at Amazon. Be great if you let us know that it's happened as a result of this conversation this afternoon. Take care now, and wishing you all the best.